Hi and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by Amy Weldon. Amy Weldon is a professional science writer and editor who has been communicating science in some form since 2007. She holds an undergraduate degree in animal behavior from Towson University in Maryland and a master's degree in science communications and public engagement from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. She's done everything from training dolphins to help write and produce YouTube videos about fusion. Amy works as a writer/editor at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and she recently started a freelance copywriting business on the side. She's a proud cat mom and ADHD adult with a blog about distracted living. When she's not staring at a computer screen, Amy's out hiking or in the gym training for her hobby of competing in the sport of strongman. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you on here. First question, how did you get into science communications and what is it? And are you a scientist or do you have a science background?
What science communications is to me, that's where I'll start, and then I'll go to other ones, is, the I think it's an art of communicating science to any audience. Any communications person knows you have to start with who your audience is. But I think science communications is a huge umbrella that a lot of things that we know and are familiar with fit under. So what we were talking about a little bit before the interview is technical writing and science writing and writing in a public affairs position for the general public, maybe newspaper articles or press releases. But it's a lot more than that too to me. I think a big part of it, and we can talk about this in a bit, is actually training scientists how to talk about science and get excited about talking about their science, because I think a lot of scientists kind of dread it. They don't get the training to talk about their research in ways that anybody can understand it. So that's what I think science communications is. How I got into science communications, my mom's oldest sister was the head uh, nature rehabilitator at a state park where I grew up. And I just thought it was the coolest thing that she got to work with birds of prey and snakes and like all kinds of native species that either ended up injured, hit by a car or something. It was her job to rehabilitate them. And then because she had some of these animals that couldn't be re released, say it's a hawk that got hit and has an injured wing, it can't be re released into the wild. She ended up founding a program or co-founding a program that's called Scales and Tails that is now like all over the nation. I got to watch her do these programs for little kids, sometimes grown-ups too, talking about a bird of prey that was sitting on her hand. Um, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever because like when you're a kid and you see someone that you're related to holding a hawk, you're just like, I want to be you when I grow up. Like, obviously. I ended up being an educator at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. That was my first job there. I kind of worked my way through different jobs. So then I was a husbandry aide. So I was mostly in charge of watering plants in one of the exhibits and making sure all the diets for the different animals were made. And then through having to go out on exhibit and feed animals, I ended up interacting with people more. And so even when I transitioned into more of a education keeper role, so I did programs with parrots. That same thing that I saw my aunt doing, I did it at the aquarium with macaws and bearded dragons and a sloth and all these, education animals we had. And eventually, I was a dolphin trainer as well. I really liked the part where I got to talk to people. Obviously, working with dolphins is amazing. So yes, that was my favorite part. But being able to adjust what I was saying and how I was talking about it to different audiences was really what I kind of gravitated towards. We would have in the same day, we'd have an amphitheater full of 1,500 fourth graders on a field trip. So what am I going to talk to them about in terms of like the dolphins compared to that night when the governor of Maryland was coming and getting a presentation? I'm probably not going to talk the same way I talk to fourth graders than I do to elected officials or VIPs. That part really interested me. And so I don't know that I'd be like technically a scientist, but I did get to see, like I got a kind of front row seat. This is in 2012, 2015, to misinformation and how that got spread through the internet and through social media really quickly. And so someone like me who has a degree in animal behavior and paid experience working side by side with animals was suddenly that wasn't good enough. That didn't qualify me as an expert because people were being fueled by emotions. They were being fueled by misinformation. And so it bothered me a lot that someone who had done the job or worked close with animals like I was working with wasn't really controlling a narrative. That the communications aspect was being controlled by people that had no animal experience, and no appreciation for what we did, and that just seemed kind of wrong to me. And I think a lot of other scientists, especially having just lived through the pandemic, can probably attest to that same thing. So I ended up leaving dolphin training and going into the like I did a lot of crazy jobs. I did catering for Chick-fil-A. I worked for an ad agency where I helped develop like anti-littering campaign materials for Baltimore County, Maryland, which was awesome. And then I decided to go to grad school. And when I went to search for science communications masters, you may relate, nothing came up. This is in 2017. That was not a thing. Science communications is not a thing. So the first thing that came up was the program in Scotland at Edinburgh University, which that's how the Scots say it, is Edinburgh. So you know. And I was single, I didn't have any stuff, so I was like, we're going to Scotland, I guess, to get this 1 year degree. Highly recommend. We can link that in the info too. But it opened a lot of doors for me. It was incredible to see how far behind the US is compared to countries like India and the UK in terms of training their scientists how to communicate with the general public or different audiences as a part of their formal training. And, or just having the field of science communications, or people like you and me are that kind of mediator, that like, mouthpiece for scientists. And so came back, uh, worked at Johns Hopkins University in one of the engineering departments under the engineering school, and got to learn a lot about all aspects of communications that I didn't necessarily get to learn coming up to this. I knew how to communicate science, but I didn't know how to do things like internal communications, which is really important in an academic department. And then I was there for 2.5 years through the pandemic, which was also crazy to be at an institution that was now responsible for communicating a lot of the science that was coming out about COVID. It wasn't me or anything like that, but I got to be, again, front row seat to how to do it properly and what, new tools and stuff they were coming up with. And then I got the job where I am now, which is at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in sunny California. And I've been here for a little over a year and a half. And yeah, I can talk about that. It's amazing, amazing work. I get to do a lot of work with scientists, helping them get the word out about the amazing research they're doing at the lab, whether it's YouTube videos, like we mentioned, or articles, or magazine pieces. So pretty cool, pretty amazing stuff, always new and always different. So that was a really long answer to that first question.
You've done a lot, and it was awesome because I was trying to calm my throat by drinking some seltzer, and your life story was of SciComm was so long that I actually finished this whole can almost. But because my voice was really raspy, and now it's not raspy anymore. So, I was listening the whole time to the thing about, especially where you said you work with the dolphins, and the people communicating the dolphin stuff usually are not scientists. You're right, because like when you go to SeaWorld, the communicators are just like people that like dolphins. Probably they're not like actual
I think now they do a way
scientists.
better job. And I think it's because of this period in history where before they had, and I can't speak for SeaWorld. I've actually never even been there before, which like is crazy to think about. But at our institution, it was certainly a situation where the people that did communications were amazing. They're funny. I'm still friends with them today, but they didn't have a science background necessarily. Um, and it's not to say that you have to have like a hard science degree at some point, but having that familiarity or that interest, and kind of forming that niche for yourself, I think is really important. And now, yeah, like we could do a whole other interview on what I think about how zoo and aquaria communications have changed since that time period. All of a sudden, anybody who walked into our exhibit was an expert. They knew way more than we did, and they could tell what a dolphin was thinking just by looking at it. And it was really hard because it seemed like nobody was standing up for us. We were the people that are there on weekends and nighttime and during holidays and civil unrest and hurricanes and all these things. This was a time. It was really hard.
That's a problem, kind of not just with, I didn't know it was a problem with dolphin trainers, but obviously in the pandemic, it was a very huge problem. Um, there's always this problem, and I don't know, how do you feel about this problem? Like, so I'm a scientist, I'm a science writer, I'm a science journalist. Um, a lot of times I've had actual conversations with journalists, and they tell me, we don't think scientists should do science journalism because knowing science is a conflict of interest. And it's like, that doesn't really make sense, but isn't that the kind of explanation you would get from someone that doesn't have a science background? Like, first of all, keep scientists out of journalism because we don't want them to be in there, because we've never actually like thought about like doing a concerted effort to add more scientists. But then also, knowing about something shouldn't make it a conflict of interest. Like a true conflict of interest, you have a vested interest in like if I know science, like I can explain it really well. Like if I'm a
Mhm.
chef, I can like cook really well, but I don't have a conflict of interest. It's like it's maddening to me because I had such a
Mhm.
hard time in the pandemic. I thought I was going insane trying to get people to listen to me talk about like all these cool ideas I had. And then like someone was like, "Oh yeah, scientists have a conflict of interest." And that really grinds my gears, to be
Yeah.
honest, because I feel like scientists really should be out there doing all this stuff. And that's why we're like, "Oh, we're just scientists. We just belong in the lab." When actually we really have a really important role in science communication. So
Tricky topics, especially like you said after, the pandemic. Like little did I know I was getting a little appetizer for what was going to come a few years later with the pandemic and people just like completely disregarding what scientists had to say.
next question is, what is it like working with subject matter experts, aka scientists, engineers, researchers, etc., at such a high level? Because like Lawrence Livermore is like a federal lab. So there's federal labs all over the US. The International Space Station is also a federal lab. For any of our viewers that don't know what a national lab is, National Institutes of Health, I think, is a federal lab. So um, they do stuff that's relevant to our nation. And what I've learned about national labs is like the world's foremost experts are at those. What's it like to actually have a conversation with them? Because the thought of that really has me shaking in my boots, not gonna lie.
They do get kind of the same personalities in general. 9 times out of 10, scientists are people that went into science or into engineering or into research because they wanted to help people. I do a lot of anytime I do an interview about an article, I'll sprinkle in personal questions that aren't going to go in the article, but like, how did you get into science? Was it just because your parents were researchers, or is it because you saw Back to the Future and you're like, I want to do that? Like, you never know what someone's story is, and a lot of times it ends up being like, oh well, I lost my relative to breast cancer, or I saw that this was happening and it was upsetting and I wanted to do something about it, whether it's climate change or it could be any number of things. So 9 times out of 10, it's not just like professional, super scientific, scary, only use big words all the time. A lot of times you can see the reluctance on their side, and that you know, historically working with communications people, it was like working with marketing, like, and not to say anything bad about marketing, but like they're looking for the headline. They're looking for what's going to get people's attention. Maybe they're not always, in the past motivated by getting the truth across first and the facts across first. They're maybe looking for what's going to grab attention and get people to read things, which is also, again, I'm not assigning any blame here. That's how the internet works. What gets more clicks, things like that. And so you kind of have this like some of them will have this feeling of like, who are you? What is this all about? Like, what are you gonna do to my work next? And so I make it very clear, like, hey, I'm not the press, I'm not the media. I'm here to help you tell your story. And I give them a little slice of mine and say, look, I have a science background, and I've seen things go wrong, and scientists and science be misrepresented, and I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. Letting them know that there's a dialogue. Like, I'm a person too, and if we can't go too far down this road because there's sensitivities, or you're not comfortable because it's not 100%, then we don't have to talk about that, or what is it that you want us to get us across? That's one of my favorite questions to ask in my interviews is, if there's one thing that our audience is going to take away remembering about your research? What is it? They seem to get really excited about the opportunity to like plug that one take home message. And I think asking them how they got into it also lights them up, because everybody does have a story, and it does help you tap into that human part. So they're definitely not all robots. They're not like, brainiacs that just walk around with calculators in their pockets all the time. They're human beings just like anyone else. And I'm really lucky because at the lab, I think they're the friendliest humans that I've ever come across in
Wow.
any field. Yeah, it's like, and that's not just, they're not paying me to say that, okay, guys.
A federal lab, their research is relevant to people
Mhm.
everywhere in the US, so
Mhm.
they have to explain it to everyone as well. And they also get funding from the government, which they don't have any scientists. Like Congress
Right.
doesn't really have that many science experts, so they have to explain the science to Congress in a way that Congress understands. So that requires a
Exactly.
lot of people like you to
Exactly.
constantly be doing that, and legislative affairs also.
Congress is not a bunch of scientists sitting there. And as you can attest, they're very busy. They don't have time to look up terms, and they don't have time to like wrap their brains around a physics equation in order to understand something so that they can vote for it. They don't have time. So where you and me are crucial is exactly what you just mentioned. And that's I think one of the most important roles at the lab that you can have is to help these scientists and researchers get across their pitch, or their research concept, or their data to people that run the funding, or people that are going to vote one way or the other. So there's 18 national labs that are funded by the Department of Energy, and Livermore is one of those 18 labs. Berkeley, or Lawrence rather, founded both the Berkeley lab during the like Manhattan Project and all that, and then the Livermore lab as well.
Do you know the history of World War II defense
Mhm.
research in
Yep.
America? Like, I just
Yep.
learned about this. Is like, because MIT has so they had a documentary. They're now my friends, Wes and Luke, are two MIT students that did a documentary called Regressions, and it
Ooh.
talks about the history of MIT and defense research. And it's a pretty so MIT started out building ships for World War II, I
Mhm.
think, or like even
Mhm.
before then. And then there were several, and then obviously the Manhattan Project was also at MIT as well as another national labs. And I mean, the
All over the
Manhattan Project
place.
was like all over the place, and
Mhm.
that was that really accelerated defense,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
also that research that they have to like solve national challenges, which is kind of
Mhm.
like separate from research that's just like done for the
Mhm.
sake of research,
Mhm.
like I don't know what to call it, but like,
It's
because in
a
science you have,
LDRD is the acronym, but I can't remember what it stands for. But basically, yeah, it's like that blue sky research where it's like, hey, this is going to solve a problem and we think it can work, and this is why you should give us funding. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens at the labs for that reason. And then obviously, most famously, in the last year and a half, almost a year now, Lawrence Livermore National Lab achieved fusion ignition
what does that mean?
using a huge laser. And in fact, I think it's 192 beams that start out like lunchbox size, and concentrating them down into a thing the size of a peppercorn, a target the size of a peppercorn, that's made out of a very specific blend of metals and has a very specific fuel mixture inside of it. With the idea being that all of those lasers, when concentrated down, and I can send you a video, will heat up the fuel just so inside that little peppercorn, that when it, ignites, it will put out more energy than it costs to create that reaction. When it came out, it was all over the news. SNL talked about it. Like, it was all over the news because it really was like another moon landing, but because it's like essentially a physics thing that's happening, it's really hard to explain. So I can send you videos for sure, but yeah,
I probably
it's
won't
it's
understand.
amazing.
I don't know why I've never been able to understand quantum physics because I'm scared of certain things. I'm scared of in science. Greek letters make me like anxious, and the
Yeah.
other one is quantum physics. Is just like immediately my brain just glazes over, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't think I can even learn this. And it's like I'm an MIT graduate. Like I should really embrace that, like, and tackle all science. But it's just like truly intimidating. I think part of it's the way it's taught, and it has this
Yeah.
kind of like it's already complex, and everyone like, oh, I know quantum physics. Like if you know
Right.
quantum physics, you're
They're
really smart. You've
fluent.
already studied it. So They need people like you for sure to explain
Oh
stuff
my
like that,
gosh.
because that is a lot. That's a lot of detail.
I guess basically what it boils down to is it's nuclear power without the nuclear waste. That's like the big part, because with nuclear power as it is now, it's great, but it does produce waste that has to be dealt with in a very specific way to protect humans and other, life.
Nuclear energy is very low cost. Apparently, it's very has a lot of benefits. But
Hmm.
nuclear waste is like the main problem. So like now
Hmm.
we can have nuclear energy with no nuclear waste. That sounds almost too good to be true. I have
It
to.
really
I guess
is.
I have to
Yeah.
go to Lawrence Livermore and be like, hey, what? Like, I don't get it.
Yes, there's plenty of YouTube. I didn't help with making any of the I made a video about how machine learning helped make it happen um before machine learning really got involved in helping simulate, like, because there's so many variables, right? Like that peppercorn target has to be machined by a human being. So yes, they're using a machine and technically they should be able to stamp out the same shape every time, but it's a sphere, so like it's almost impossible to create a perfect sphere, so there's going to be little teeny variations in the shape of that peppercorn target, right? So that could have implications and like make it so the lasers aren't as concentrated and it doesn't get as hot. Like there could be a hair on the thing that holds the target. Like I don't think that would happen because the clean room and everything. But like there could be, we're in California. There could be a rumble from an earthquake, that kind of moves things off target in the one blink, less than blink of an eye, that all this happens in. But so there's a lot of variables. So where machine learning comes in is that it's able to take all this data that we've, you know, gotten over 10 years of doing these shots and account for a lot of those variables without actually having to do the science, the actual experiment. And because of machine learning helping predict like which variables and which uh you know scenarios would be most successful, they were able to actually make ignition for fusion happen. Like, I think you'll have to look at the video. I'll send you the link, but it's something like the last time they were like, oh, we're close to the threshold. It was only like a 17% chance that they would succeed in achieving ignition, and after machine learning has come in last December, the first time they actually got ignition for fusion to happen, it was like a 52% chance of success. So like, and that was like our exascale computer isn't even online yet. So imagine what they'll be able to do with experiments, being able to simulate so much with these supercomputers before, anybody even suits up in their clean room outfit. It's pretty amazing.
It's just incredible. Like my mind literally cannot comprehend that. Like, and that's like the second. It's just wow. I guess I have to. I'm really intrigued by this because I thought that was one of those things that would never happen. Because I feel like there's a list of things that can never happen according to the laws of physics, and that's one of them. So I guess Lawrence
Yeah.
Livermore did it. So
Yeah.
congrats to you guys. That's
Right.
incredible.
Yeah, I wish I had nothing to do with it. I sat in the auditorium when the Secretary of Energy like addressed us and they had the press conference. But like, and that by that I mean I was in our auditorium while that happened in DC. Like I wasn't there, but and I was like fairly new too, so I was like, wow, I'm spoiled. Like I just come in and this place like achieves harnessing the power of the sun like that. Like, okay, pretty
That's
legit.
intense.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it's like whenever a lot of people work together to solve something, like it's amazing to see like that. It's in the pandemic. There was so much sadness, but one thing that was like really amazing was we actually solved like a lot of problems, and a lot of it was done through SciComm. A lot of it was done by everyone just
Yeah.
chiming in and working together. And that going back to the Manhattan Project World War II, if you look at World War II history, there's a lot of people doing like the most kind of like I looked at World War II posters about that were like promo posters from that time. It was like save your fats because they could go and be used for like overseas for weapons and stuff. And then like buy war bonds. And then there's like all
Hmm.
this little tiny stuff that everyone did, and that was all through communication as well. And I
Yeah.
think I wonder to what extent we use science communication to do those little personal things. Like we had wearing masks and vaccines, but a lot of people didn't like them. But I was thinking, because I'm trying to contextualize COVID in the context of like other things that people have experienced. So I was like, well, World War II was like global as well. And it was also
Hmm.
a lot of stuff happening. And like, I tried to imagine, like, what if someone didn't want to do any of that stuff and they just kind of protested every day that they didn't want to be in it? And I'm assuming that must have happened. And I asked this
It
guy that was
did.
an expert and he said it did. So,
Yeah.
um,
There's definitely mass,
yeah.
protests in the turn of the 1900s when the last flu epidemic went through. People, there's like, you can find news stories about people refusing to wear masks and stuff like that.
And I think that science overall should really be more open to people. I
Hmm.
think like national labs probably do the best job of communicating science because they have to communicate to the government, to the people, to do different federal requirements. Because there's a lot of different requirements that the government has to do. I don't know if SciComm is one of them, but the White House recently did actually draft. The Office of Science and Technology Policy created a recommendation for I guess for scientists to make their work more transparent. So I feel like
Hmm.
we actually are. That would be huge if we could have like a federal SciComm mandate. And obviously places like Lawrence Livermore would be the first people to have that, like, you have to communicate your science to in such and such ways. Like I don't know if that exists because I've never worked in the federal government doing SciComm. So, but it's like whenever the government says to do stuff, the federal government is always affected by the laws that it makes for itself. So
Yeah, yeah, and elections can kind of mess, what gets funded now may not be the case, and if somebody else gets elected down the road, so it can be tricky. But yeah, they actually, that mandate was like, I think I saw it from you posting about it, like, hey, there should be an Office of Science Communications, which was like, I don't know, super validating for me. In Scotland, we got to tour their parliament, and they actually have an office for science communicators inside the parliament building. So, specifically for science
that is
communicators,
awesome
right?
because I wish
So,
they had
if,
that in Congress.
Bob McLeod is trying to understand this bill sitting on his desk about riparian buffers or something, and he can't wrap his brain around it, and he doesn't have time, he can have one of the SciCommers come up or trundle down to their office on the first floor and ask them about it and get an explanation. So that's incredible to me.
We have some lessons to learn from Scotland. What do you like the most about your job, and what challenges have you faced so far?
I think what I like most about my job right now, so right now I'm a writer editor with what's called the Technical Information Department, and it's kind of like a in-house, like, copywriting or ad agency. So if somebody in engineering needs help with a PowerPoint presentation, they can pay for X amount of hours for a writer or a graphic designer out of the technical information department to help them with that presentation. Or say somebody in computing wants to do a YouTube video, it's exactly what I'm working on right now. They'll say, okay, we need a script to be written, we need a storyboard, we need a writer for that. We have 60 hours budget to get this done. So it's kind of cool because I get to work for everybody in the lab, and you know, I get to learn about all the different amazing, crazy science that's happening all over the lab. Obviously, being on the West Coast when all my family's on the East Coast is also a challenge, but that's what FaceTime stuff is for, right?
Yeah, because you're a Marylander and you live in California. Do they have Old Bay in California?
That's like the most important question. You'd be surprised. I think I bought Old Bay when I was in Scotland because they had like an American aisle in one of the grocery stores. So, so it's all right, and everyone knows what it is now because I think McCormick bought it a while ago, so you can get it pretty regularly everywhere.
Our last question. How can one feel less intimidated by the idea of doing science communications at a national lab or government agency? I feel really intimidated by that but it's also like Tony Stark level of awesome because, like, how cool would it be to like communicate the science on like this latest, like, anything that's like really important and has helped save the world. And like, I think that would be a cool job. I always tell people I have like 9 million dream jobs. One of them is being Tony Stark. It's like not a
Fair.
real possible job, but like Tony Stark performs well under pressure. He solves problems. He meets the challenges. Sure, he has like a bit of like a substance abuse problem now because of all the traumas he's gone through. But I can say that like that whole series is like so much better because he's been able to develop stuff quickly under pressure.
Right.
Because he's an MIT grad. I'm also MIT grad, so he's not a real person, but I am a real MIT graduate. So yeah, and I think the government needs people like me. So if anyone in the government is watching this, please hire me to do SciComm also, because this job sounds really cool. So anyway, going back to the question, how can one feel less intimidated by the idea of doing science communications at a national lab or a government agency or the SciComm world in general?
I will say two things. One, Tony Stark would totally be a contractor because he would not accept government like pay by any means. To feel less intimidated, like one, we were just talking about this before. You're a smart person too. Like both of us need to like give ourselves some credit because I studied biology and psychology and I have to wrap my brain around like concepts of physics for like material science articles. That is not my wheelhouse. I have to do a lot of work, maybe more work than somebody who did go to school for engineering or thermodynamics or something like that. But I can do it and you can do it too. Like if anything came down the line, you could probably figure it out because you have that science brain and that like, oh, it's this word which has this root, which probably means it involves this. So like you already have that kind of like rationale, that like programming built in. So anybody
Yeah,
who's
the
listening to
science
this,
mind.
exactly. Anybody who's listening to this or watching this, like, don't be intimidated by the science because you will figure it out. Especially if you're already interested in science, you've done science in some capacity, like you'll figure that part out. And like we said before, even though these people are just about Tony Stark in some cases, like they're super nice. They're human beings just like us. And at the end of the day, one of the things that's been really enjoyable at every level of science that I've worked at, and even now at the lab, these folks do see the value in science communications. And every time I say to someone what my degree is in, they're like, "That's a thing? That's so cool!" Like we need more people like you. Like that's awesome. So I think the interest is there across the board. So if you are, even if you don't have a degree in science communications, if you're somebody that wants to do this kind of thing, just know that scientists need you and they're aware that they need you and they're excited that you exist. So it's all about how to market yourself. Science communications is important and scientists know that. And they're excited to know that science communicators like you and me are out there and willing to help them and excited to help them. So um, don't be intimidated because you're so needed. And it's just about marketing yourself in the right way as one, a human being that wants to help, and two, someone that has at least a little bit of a science brain and can speak the language a little bit. So yeah.
It's really like encouraging that you say that as someone that works in the federal government, because sometimes as a science communicator, I honestly feel like I am either doing nothing. Everyone's like, "What's your job? Like, are you like I'm a scientist, I'm an MIT trained writer." That doesn't make any sense. Like I feel like
That's
it kind of
huge.
like, it's like, thanks, mom and dad. Look, mom and dad, I'm a writer now. I went to MIT and
Right.
I'm a writer. But it's actually really important to do science
It is.
communication. Like we take writing for granted in the sciences. And I didn't even come up with that. I think Wu Dan Yan said that. She said,
Yeah.
in science, we take writing for granted. So I think we really do take, because it's writing is its own field. You can become an expert on dangling participles, and I tutor grammar, and I don't know what
Yeah.
those are exactly, but
I am the
um,
pentameter.
I do a lot of like comma. I tell people like, put the comma over there, and they're like, what? I'm like, yes, and I spend like hours and hours a day telling people where to put commas, and it's so weird
Right.
because I started fancy comma, and like now I only talk about commas, and like
Oh
I really got good at where
no.
to put commas, but yeah, I love that the government doesn't discount, and not just the U.S. government, but apparently Scotland government, and I'm sure tons of other governments around the world. Don't discount the value of communication in science, and I think that's a really powerful statement about the importance of science communication, because sometimes it can feel like as a science communicator you're either doing nothing or you're pursuing your hobby and you're just kind of
Yeah.
doing this on the side, and like it's not really relevant. But it's like, how many conversations have I had with my relatives in the pandemic about, oh, you got to get your vaccine, and like those actually worked because like I'm a science communicator, and I
Yeah.
know how to, and I also know how to communicate, and I'm
Yeah.
very persuasive. So sometimes those things that you feel like just don't make a difference, like really do make a difference. But I really do
Absolutely.
like feel like I sometimes am not doing anything every day, but in reality, science communicators do something very important. So, and you can apparently get a job in the federal government doing science communication, which
Yep.
is really cool because now I'm going to be on the lookout for SciComm jobs. I do have several USA Jobs alerts for like writing and editing, public affairs, and social media,
Yeah.
but it's I know what who's hiring and who's not every week, and it's really interesting because I've been applying to jobs, but it's like maybe someday I will work for the federal government. Or anyone
Yeah.
watching this, definitely go to USA Jobs
Yep.
and sign up for an account so you can get a SciComm job in the government, because you're not the only person I know that has a SciComm job. I know others in
Yep.
more of the life sciences realm, but
And like
truly
get to
very
know the like
important.
nomenclature. Like some places will just post public affairs positions, but other places like sometimes it gets posted as like a research position or like a I'm trying to remember. I've definitely seen things posted under like you think it's going to be a scientist, but then you read it and it's like we need somebody to talk to the public about what we're doing in the fishery off of whatever place. Like, so yeah, get used to like exactly what you're talking about. Those alerts that you can set for different keywords, I guess.
Those are
But
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
in 2017, I think it was a Tuesday. I had just gotten paid on the Thursday at my like it was like a ad agency job where I was doing the like helping with the anti-littering campaigns and stuff, and I was like already out of money because I was in debt and I was I'd been through a breakup and all, and I was like, oh my god, I just got paid on Thursday and I'm broke already. Like I need to figure out how to make more money. Like I guess I need to get a master's degree. So I Googled, science communications masters, hoping I'd find like a night school online program at a state school. Nothing existed. The only one I found was the Scotland one. Now Cornell has an undergrad program in science communications. I'm pretty sure MIT has something. It used to just be science writing, and that was it. Santa Cruz. And I think there's another program maybe in Texas that had like a certificate program for science writing. But science communications coming, y'all. It is a field. It is growing. The importance is, only becoming more clear. Like you said with the White House thing. Hey, we should have an office for this. So get in there. Start applying for jobs. Keep in the lookout. So
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I'm actually working on MIT does have a science journalism program. They do have science communication requirements for undergrads because I took a SciComm class, and now I'm creating my own SciComm for Fancy Comma, an add-on science communication curriculum that anyone can use, but it's not
oh,
developed yet.
nice.
It's a work in progress, and it's going to be entirely based on Fancy Comma stuff. So um,
Yeah,
it's
that's
going to be
great.
free, open to everyone. So yeah, I'm really excited because I feel like we should all be able to access a SciComm education, even if we don't go get a degree in it, which I really
Right.
wanted to do out of
Right.
college. And I had this conversation on the steps of the student center at MIT with my mom, and I was like, "Oh, mom, I really want to go get a science communications degree, but there's only like 4 places that have it." It was like
Yeah.
UC Santa Cruz,
Yeah. Which is,
Colorado.
as someone
There
who
was
lives
like
an
a
hour from
bunch of
Santa Cruz, it's
places.
very expensive to live here. So make sure you know what you're signing up for.
It's
It's a
like
great
not
program.
possible. Like
But
I was in Massachusetts. Like I can't leave. Like I probably won't get into the program. There's only 5. Like I'm not that good. I'm already not good in science communication because I just learned about it. But actually, like after that, I spent like 10 years doing science, and I didn't know you could even make this your job. So now my goal
right?
is to kind of like make it easier for anyone to do science communication. Like they don't have to get a degree in it. That would be awesome if there were more
That's so
science communication.
cool.
That would be life changing. So
Yeah.
everyone stay tuned for my science communication curriculum that I'll be like talking about on our blog and in our newsletter and everywhere. And obviously follow us on all our socials for all of our interviews. Definitely sign up on USA Jobs. People in the US to that are interested in SciComm, because the government needs you to explain science to the people, and who better than to actual scientists to do that job, because scientists are experts in science. So thanks everyone for listening to this awesome conversation with Amy Weldon of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, follow National Labs on LinkedIn. That's actually how I found my job posting. They're not on USA Jobs. Follow them on LinkedIn. They'll post their jobs on LinkedIn, and they're all over the country. So definitely check that out.
That is awesome. That's a really good insider tip for getting a job at Lawrence Livermore, everyone. So, um, cool. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for the
Yeah.
conversation. It's been amazing.
Thank you for doing all this. And thanks for having me on.